If you're new to kind of meeting me and joining these workshops, what goes on in our what goes on in these is each week I pick some sort of topic of things that I think helps people with their nature journaling. Often it is around some aspect of nature drawing, but not always. And we kind of unpack that and give you tools to help you with your own nature journaling. Oh, I see in the chat that Leandra, you're here for your first time, and we are really, really delighted that you are with us. Welcome to our community. We're really, really happy to hear that you're here. Um, so each week I want to share with you like some strategies, like, ooh, that's gonna make my nature journaling easier. Um, and today what I wanted to do is to take a close look at drawing bird wings. And specifically, I want to look at how to make bird wings simpler to draw, how to look at the complexity of a bird wing, and with a few lines, kind of get something down that that feels like the bird wing, that looks like the bird wing, that helps you make sense of what you're seeing out there. Um, Birds are covered with feathers. Most of the feathers on the bird are these little contour feathers that just kind of make it look like it's covered with fur. The edge of the feathers can be kind of fluffy, and on some of them you can kind of see like, oh, here's the edge of this feather, here's the edge of this feather. Um, but a lot of it just sort of looks like a little, feather suit that smoothly covers over the bird. You're not seeing feather, feather, feather. But on the wings, you do. You see, the wings have these the barbules are these tiny little hooks that hold part of the fabric of a wing together. If you ever zipped and unzipped a feather, kind of pulled it apart, and then you can kind of with your fingers and it comes back together. You're taking the barbules apart and then putting them back together. Well, um, with a on the wings, there's lots of barbules holding the wings into a nice tight surface. And this is crazy useful if you're going to be flying with them. Less useful if you just want this sort of warm envelope of fluff around you. So when we make a down jacket and we're plucking feathers out of birds, we don't use the wing feathers. We use these little underneath down feathers because those are the floofy ones. Those give you warmth. But for flapping around, you want lots of these little barbules. This means that on the wings, you can actually see individual feathers. So that adds, and then the edges of these overlapping feathers can be colored in different ways, and that gives you crazy patterns across the wing. So on most of the birds, their bodies are, once you kind of get the idea of how to draw the shape of the bird, you your birds are going to look like birds, and then you get over to the wing, and there's all of a sudden feather, 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 feather. How do I deal with this? We're going to take a look at the structure of wings, understand the feathers that are there, and then look at ways that a bunch of my favorite illustrators have simplified these. So I'll be putting books and kind of examples of different people. And then we'll be looking at ways ourselves of kind of doing that. I think that, um, in order to simplify the wing, you want to know what is there. What is the structure that is behind the wing? So that way, with just a few lines, you can suggest that there's wing there. You can look at some people's sketches and just like whoop, 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 and it feels like there's a wing there. That's because they understand the structure of the wing. And then when they're simplifying it, they are drawing less than they know. But they're able to deliberately choose these few strokes that represent this super complexity of information that is there. When I started drawing, illustrating birds, once I kind of realized like, oh my gosh, there's this structure in the wing. There are these different groups of feathers and they overlap in a specific way. I realized, okay, I'm gonna have to memorize that. And once I memorize that, I put all that information into my drawings of birds. And the result is that a lot of the birds that I drew in this phase of my illustration career, those birds then ended up kind of looking like a bird with a fish scales or pine cones stuck on the side of the body, the harsh edges of all these feathers. I was showing what I knew. So I recommend us all understand the structure and then have restraint and show less than you know. Um, if you're showing more than you know, that means you don't understand what is there, right? So we're going to start by looking at the feathers on the side of a bird. We're going to look at some photographs and define those feather groups. Then we're going to look at what are some kind of um, key sort of piles or shapes that you'll see, and what are ways we can simplify all of this complex information. All right. So to help us with this, I'm going to hop over to birdpixel.com. This is a website by the photographer Vivek Kanzode. It is a wonderful set of of um, of very well curated photographs of birds, and he encourages us nature journalers to use these to help us with um, our bird sketching. And so rather than saying like, this is, you need, to pay me royalties for using these, he's saying, come on in and let's all learn birds together. Please use these as a resource. Wonderful, wonderful resource. Let's go there now. So here I am. I'm on the website. This is one of his photographs. And this is a white-crowned sparrow, beautiful little bird. And I'm going to zoom in on part of it, and we're going to take a look at the wing here. All right. As I'm looking at this wing, I see so look on the back here, like on the back of the bird here, it just looks like it's furry, right? The chest of the bird looks like it's furry. It's not fur, it's actually feathers. But you knew that already. But then you look on the wing itself and you see totally different type of texture going on here. So how do we handle drawing this? Again, we're going to take a look at what is the basic structure in these wings. We're going to look at several different birds. And what I'm going to encourage you to do is, as I'm drawing on the screen, we're going to draw along at home. If you kind of take your own notes of these, you do it several times on several birds, you're going to really grok this sense of how these wings are put together and the similarities between them. I'm going to move over here. Evan, can you still hear me?
For the most part, yes, but slightly less well.
Okay, I'm going to speak a little bit louder voice while I'm over here. If I'm kind of upping my volume like this, is that good?
That's pretty good, yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If I get quiet, let me know. So on the wing here, what do we want to do? Actually, I'm going to make this wing a little bit larger on your screen. And I can't. So I won't. All right, let me see here. I am going to get my highlighter. So parts of the wing. I'm going to start up on the top of the wing up here. When I'm wiggling my pen around, can you see my pen wiggling?
Yes.
Okay, good. Wiggle the pen. We're going to start up here and we're going to work our way down on the wing. You see these little kind of group of feathers here? There's one feather here that is on top of all the others. All right. Whoa. It's doing some sort of weird disappear effect. Let me try this. Are you going to stay? Yes, you are. All right, so this is one feather, and it's on top of a little group of feathers here. There's another feather that's tucking behind it here, behind it here. These are called median secondary covert feathers. They're all in a row. The one that is on top is that first one that I drew. Um, and actually, maybe let's start this way. Um, we're going to divide this wing into several sections. There are feathers that are on top of the, there are these feathers up here, this little row in here and this row across here. Those are called covert feathers, and they cover up the top of the wing. Technically, they are secondary covert feathers. They cover up the sort of wrist and forearm area of the bird, and longer flight feathers hang down from these. Attached to those is a big pile of feathers right in here. These are called secondary feathers, and they start with 1, 2, 3 feathers, and then there's a whole pile of feathers about the same length. So 1, 2, 3 feathers getting longer, and there's a whole pile the same length. Those are your secondary feathers. And finally, sticking out the bottom of that are my primary flight feathers. Those are the ones that are attached to the bird's hand. They are longer and they stick out underneath these secondaries. So I have covert feathers up at the top. I have secondary and primary feathers down on the bottom. On this bird, we can't see its primary covert feathers very well, or its alula very, actually we can't see the alula right there. But there's another group of feathers called the primary coverts. We'll see that on another bird. But for now, let's just, we're going to kind of take a look here at this. I'm going to kind of block it in with different groups of feathers. I have the little row of covert feathers up here. It's a small line of feathers across the top of the wing. It sits on top of this other pile of feathers. This time, this feather right here is the one on top of this whole pile. And then this feather tucks underneath it. And then this feather, and then this feather, and this feather, and this feather, and this feather tuck underneath that. And so we get this whole row of what are called greater coverts that tuck underneath our median coverts. Then I have these 3 feathers right here. These feathers are the first 3 secondary feathers. They are also called tertial feathers. They often have bright colors. There's usually 3 of them, and they make a big, significant pattern in the top of this pile of feathers called the secondary feathers. And then the rest of the secondary feathers, if you look in here where my pencil is wiggling, you see this little edge right there. There's a whole pile of feathers the same length. So I have 1, 2, 3, and then a whole pile the same length. Those are my secondary feathers. And then we have, sticking out the bottom here, these feathers here are my longer flight feathers. These are called primary feathers. So I have covert feathers over the top, secondary covert feathers, which we're seeing in this photograph. I have my pile of secondaries. You can, if you like more terms, be aware that the first 3 are sometimes called tertials. See, tertiary, it means sort of the 3rd level. So there's primary, secondary, and tertiary feathers. The tertiary or tertial feathers are those 1, 2, 3. If you want fewer terms, think of this as the first 3 secondary feathers get progressively larger. Or if you like terms, there are tertials. Now, let's make all this go away. And um, I am going to zoom back out here. Right. Um, let's take a look at another sparrow. Again, a white-crowned sparrow. And what we're going to do is, this will seem repetitive. It is, because I want you to see the same feathers on a different photograph. Take a look at this yourself and see this wing is a little bit more foreshortened. It's tilted away from us, so their wing is a little bit shorter. But can you pick out the covert feathers, those rows of feathers on the top? Notice that those covert feathers, the tips of them have little white poofs on them, on one side of them, and that makes for rows of feathers, rows of white that go like that across the wing. We call these rows the wing bars. So when you're seeing wing bars on a bird, you're looking at covert feathers. Um, so the one that's on top here, this feather is on top of this feather, is on top of this feather, is on top of this feather. Those are my median secondary covert feathers. They are sitting on top of this next row, and look who's on top here. This feather is on top of this, it's on top of this, on top of this. Here are um, my greater secondary covert feathers. Actually, I want to do a quick little erase here and check something. Ah, I thought so. Um, I misspoke. Um, if you noticed just a moment ago, I said that, would be interesting if anybody caught this. Did you hear what I said that was wrong? I said something that was wrong and anatomically inaccurate. So let's see. I'll do this again. I was talking about this first row. Notice that. Can you see where my pen is wiggling? Which feather is on top? This feather or this feather? A or B? A or B? Which one's on top? Yeah, A is on top of B. So this feather is actually on top. I first was saying like this one is on top. But no, these ones are reversed the other way. So this one is on top of the pile. On your median covert feathers, the one that is closest to the front is on top. Then you hop over to the next row down here, the greater secondary coverts. This one is on top. That's on top of the pile, and everybody else is tucking underneath that. So those are our greater and median secondary coverts. Now, can you spot the 1, 2, 3 of the tertials? Check that out. So we've got our tertial feathers right here. There's number 1. There's number 2. There is number 3. Now, when I first saw this, I thought to myself, like, oh, does this mean that feather number 1 is shaped like this and feather number 2 is much broader and feather number 3 is really broad? And then they're all piled up on top of each other. No, it's not going on like that. What's happening behind the scenes here is here's feather number 1. Feather number 2 is, actually, let me erase feather number 1. Here we go. Look at how these are arranged. This feather here, let's do feather number 3. It comes down here over here, and then it comes up like that. So it's not going all the way out here. This next one is staggered and overlapping this way, and then the next one is like that. So it's not that this first feather is really, 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 really broad. That's not what's going on. All right. So here are those tertials, 1, 2, 3. So I think of the secondary feathers as 1, 2, 3, and then a whole pile the same length. And you look in here, here is that whole pile the same length. And peeking out from underneath that are our primary feathers. Hello, primary feathers. This time, I see part of what are called the primary coverts being visible. And if you look at the very front of the wing, you see this tiny little bit of business right here, right there. Right? See that? I'm going to erase it and see that little bit of dark? Those are the covert feathers of the primaries, or the primary covert feathers. And they sit up there on the top edge of the wing. And finally, we'll use green. These are my primary feathers in here. Now, I'm going to erase those primary feathers, and I want you to notice this weird little line right here. You see there's a little kind of weird line at this location across the edge of the wing. What that is each feather in there has a shape like this. The feather has a little step in it. Here's the back edge of the feather. So there's a little step right here. And so this first feather comes down and steps in. The next feather goes down a little bit further, steps in. The next one comes in further and steps in. So there's a little step in, and then the feathers will continue down there. And where those steps are across the primary feathers, often there will be above it, there will be kind of a white edge on the wing, and below it, less. And the result of that is that people will think that there are a bunch of small feathers coming like this. They think that, okay, then you must have sort of at this secondary feather height, more feathers just kind of coming across that, like a big block of feathers. But no, what those are the primary feathers just having that little step in, and that's what gives you that little mark across the wing there. But that mark across the wing doesn't mean that so again, it's just look at how easy it would be to misinterpret this wing, saying that there's a big batch of feathers here with these ones sticking out behind it. And we see that because there's a really kind of clear white mark in this area, and we see this edge coming here. So your brain says that these are secondary feathers going all the way across, instead of secondary feathers through here and the primary feathers coming down here just with a little step at that point. I'm going to erase these marks again, take a look at that, and you'll see why that can be confusing. Now, I am going to move away from my little sparrow friend here. And let's go to, all right, here I am on, this is why I love Bird Pixel. Just look at all these different cool groups of birds, all these really, really neat birds. And what I can do is I want to look around on different birds. How do these patterns show up? And specifically what I want to start doing is looking at some birds with all dark wings. So this little dipper here is going to help me. Dip, 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 dipper. And you have got your wing really fluffed up. Let's take a look at you. All right. What I want to be able to do is to look at this wing and analyze it the same way, right? Where are the primaries, the secondaries, the primary coverts, the secondary coverts, all these sorts of feathers? If I can do that on this wing, I'm really moving myself towards being able to quickly be able to sketch this wing. Let's walk through this one together, and then now, folks, I want everybody to know that somewhere in London right now, as Ray Bonto is looking at all of these pages, He is sketching every one. One of these pops up on the screen. He's immediately grabs his pencil and he's sketching. So he has already a page, a journal page filled with bird wings that he's been practicing drawing. I'm just guessing that Ray Montos out there just boom, 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 boom. And then by doing those reps, it really helps reinforce all these ideas in. So if you just look at the screen, you're going to find that your brain's not going to pick up as much and remember as much. So draw with us. All right. Um, so in this, if you look up here on underneath the edge of these feathers here, you can see this sort of line of feathers sticking out here. Those are your median secondary coverts sticking out. And tucked up behind them is a row of feathers here. This one is on top, and this one is kind of pushed over to the side. And there's a whole bunch of feathers like that. So we've got our next row of here. Those are the median secondary coverts. And below that are our secondaries and our the tertials and secondaries. So remember, 1, 2, 3, whole pile the same length. Feather number 1 here is kind of funked out. It has kind of a little split in it right there, but that's feather number 1. Feather number 2 is tucking underneath that, and feather number 3 is right in there. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then we have this whole pile the same length right in there. Those are our secondary feathers. Then on the front edge of the wing, we have the primary feathers. So my primary feathers, and here we see the primary covert feathers as being a fairly also significant little piece out here. So here are my primary coverts, this little wedge here. These little feathers tucked in here. They are going to be underneath sort of where the secondaries end, and sort of tucked underneath the secondary coverts. And then the rest of the primary feathers are this area here, and they overlap each other. This one doesn't really have a big step in this area here, but when I erase that line, you'll see that you can see a slight little step in there, a little detail. See a little bit of a hint of, yeah, we're kind of turning around there. Oops, actually, I meant to, instead of stopping screen share, I meant to, we'll go back there, show you a wing of a different bird. But I like this one because it is, let's just take a look at another dipper right here. Take a look at this and just sort of notice what kind of groups of feathers are kind of sticking out to you. As I look at this, I can pick out that this sort of lump of these covert feathers, that's a big prominent bump. I'm seeing kind of a big step in here, and then this little piece is sticking out primary. So this 1, 2, 3, kind of 4 sections in here. As I look at this wing, those are the pieces that are really primarily sticking out to me, right? The edges of these in here are a little bit less prominent, right? Um, let's, oh, I have to get rid of those little lines that I drew. Hold on. Let's take a look now at a little tiny little bird with we're going to take a look at a tiny little bird, and what we want to do is see if we can pick out these same feathers on its wing. So let's see. Right. Okay. The chickadees. This is going to help us out. All right. So all these little tiny little birds here. Can we look at one of their wings and see these same sorts of features? Spoiler alert. Yes, we can. Right. Now we have a little bit of overlap here. But notice what's going on in here. We have covert feathers up in here. We have our secondary feathers in a pile here. Our primary feathers in a pile underneath those. These right here are my secondary coverts. And I haven't really mentioned these two feathers right here. These feathers right here are actually a sort of a separate little, these are attached to the bird's thumb. They're called an alula or a lula. I don't know how to pronounce it. I just see it in print. Um, these are feathers that are attached to the bird's thumb. But what I want to be able to do is to kind of to look at this wing, and now I'm going to erase these lines here and notice sort of where I am kind of seeing detail on the wing. I'm seeing in this zone here a big zone of white, a big white bar. In here, I'm seeing some white edges. Up in here, I see kind of a big white block. And over here, the feathers are sort of the same color. So what I'm trying to do now is just sort of look at what patterns are really standing out to me and noticing where those patterns might be kind of um, relative to the those other kind of feather groups that we pointed out before. Come on down here and uh, this bird here. Oh, this one right here. This is going to be fun. Let's take a look at this bird right here. And the reason that I want to look at this bird um, is because um, the the patterns are going to be, you know, let's sort of notice what kind of wing details we see. In this upper part of the wing, in the coverts up here, I'm not seeing sort of edges of feathers. I'm seeing this as a big gray lump. I'm also seeing the alula as a little separate thumb thing sticking out. Then here in the wing itself, this one's sort of rotated around, so I'm not seeing those 1, 2, 3 very clearly. What I'm seeing is in this zone here, I'm seeing an area where I am seeing kind of light feather edges. Down here, it's mostly dark. And so what if I'm drawing this bird accurately, I want to kind of get an impression of that. These primary feathers that are up in this area have white edges. And then the secondary feathers up in here all have white edges, and that kind of gives me this zone down below where I have there. Um, those feathers are not as dark. I mean, those feathers are dark, they don't have those light edges. So the reason I'm wanting a bird like this to show you is that I want I want us to look at, let's go for another bird that is mostly, yeah, oh, look at this. This will work. I'm going to try to make that bird a little bit larger. Yeah, there we go. All right. So if I get in here and I start drawing the edges of feathers, I'm going to superimpose kind of a scale pattern that is actually very subtle on top of this bird. And it's not going to look like this bird. What do I really see here going on? Well, um, I have, hold on, I need this pen. Um, let's see, what do I see? I see these feathers in here. What are they? They're my secondary feathers. There's actually a one, two, three, and a whole pile the same length, and they're tan in here. This big dark area on the bottom, those are all primary feathers, and the edges of those feathers are really subtle, and it looks like a big dark area. Over the top of that, I have covert feathers. I have a row here of median secondary coverts down here. Oh, sorry, greater secondary coverts. I have lesser second median. I'm messing up. Median secondary coverts over the top of that, and these ones up in here, those are just more sort of those are also secondary coverts on the feather. These are called on the bird. They're called lesser secondary coverts. Um, this whole area up here, small feathers. And what I'm really not seeing is the way I would have drawn this some years ago is I would have gone, all right, I have, actually, let's erase all of this. And I would start by just outlining all the edges of these feathers and say, I think I'm seeing, I've got one feather here, a medium size one, a larger one, and then these are the edges of other secondary feathers. I have um, a row of covert feathers here. I draw in all the edges of those. I would say in here, I've got another row of covert feathers and they're kind of coming around the other direction, right? And then I've got some smaller feathers up in here. I really can't see the edges of those, and I'd get really worried and panicked and think I'd have to draw on all these kind of edges of feathers where I didn't know where they were going. And then I would draw in all of these primary feathers. And you see, I'd have all of this sort of edges of feathers on top of my wing. But as I look at this, that's really not what I'm seeing. What I'm seeing primarily here is that this boundary right here is really prominent. There's another little kind of minor shadow in here and a hint of a couple of feathers, a hint of a feather over there. And then this area down below, this area here, is darker brown and maybe a medium brown in this area here, and then lighter above that. So that's actually what I'm seeing. And what I'm going to, what I want to be able to do is to look at this and understand, okay, that big kind of brown lump on the back, those are secondary and tertial feathers sticking out. Then there's a whole bunch of covert feathers, but I'm going to try to actually draw not in the edges of each little feather where I think they're supposed to be, but this sort of larger pattern of what I do see. So let me go here to the document camera. And where did I put that big book for drawing in? Oh, here it is. Um, let me stop this share and come here. So essentially what I'm now trying to get myself to do is to think of that on this wing, there's a big kind of swoosh, there's a light pile here. There is a this area down here is dark. Up here in the wing, there's maybe kind of a hint of some little kind of feathers in here. Um, but this is closer to what I'm actually seeing than if I drew in all of those feather edges. So let's take a look at some ways that master bird artists are handling this problem. How do you suggest the detail there is there? This is a book of drawings called Landmarks and Sea Wings by one of my heroes, John Busby. And let's take a look at uh, some bird wings. What's going on here? So what John Busby is doing is he's not drawing the edges of each feather. He's drawing these sort of shadows where major piles of feathers have kind of collided with each other. A few little marks to these sort of dark wingtips. Um, and but he's not drawing in feather, feather, feather. He's drawing in groups of feathers and suggesting these piles of feathers, which is what you're actually seeing if you were looking at a bird like this from a distance. I'm going to fast forward to some little sparrowy typey birds. Where are we going here? Here we go. Look at, look at that. This is really interesting. So these sorts of birds here, I think these are really interesting. He's here on the Galapagos Islands looking at some of Darwin's finches. And you're seeing in this area here, this is all of those covert feathers, the scapular feathers and covert feathers in here. This out here is secondary feathers coming down. And these birds have rather short primary feathers. So there's the, kind of the tip of the short primaries in here. So secondaries and primaries kind of coming in here. This little dark swatch right there is the alula kind of coming in here. So there's just a little, just sort of a simplification of this. In this area, I can see some edges of feathers. And in this area, I'm seeing a mass, and they come to a little shadow between those. But he's able to simplify this way because he understands that underlying structure of the wing. Look at this one with it that is in the sunlight here. Isn't that interesting? Right. So what's he doing here? This line here, we've got some sort of edges of some covert feathers, and then the rest of the wing here is just, it's a little line. It's a suggestion that there's more wing in there. From this distance, she's not seeing feather, 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 feather. How tempting would it be to draw in all the feathers that we know go into that area? Right. Let's take a look at some more here. Um, right, so here is here's a little hawk hanging out here. And oh, actually, that one is kind of dark, so it's hard to see the details on it. But let's look at this guy right here. Oops, right there. What's going on this bird's wing?
Oh, sorry.
Uh,
Could you actually scooch up a
oh,
little more?
there we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
So he's made a quick pencil sketch to capture this pose. And then in here, we've got some scapular feathers in here, which are sort of shoulder feathers, wing feathers in here, a little bit of suggestion that there's some feather edges. In here, the primaries and the secondaries, the most we get of the difference between the primaries and the secondaries is that there's a little step in here where we can see that those 1, 2, 3 feathers would come down here. We're not even having to kind of articulate the edges of those 1, 2, 3. And then we get into a whole pile that is the same length. So with oh, here we go. Look at this. Let's go to Hawaii. Look at that bird. Right? Can you get away with this is just some dark pencil line and a little bit like all the feathers of the wing just suggested with this little dark pile. This one over here, I have covert feathers in here, those greater coverts, so you see a little bit of sort of suggestion of edges. This is the secondaries in here, and then and primaries sort of sticking out behind here. Wow. Look at this one over here. These are covert feathers in here. These are my secondary feathers here, primaries. So he's aware, there's a little kind of, you can see a little hint of some feather edges right in this area, but the rest of it is just suggested. So that is, let's see if we can find another bird like that. That is, I mean, what permission we have to not have to kind of get in there and get fussy. I want to understand what is happening in there, but I don't have to noodle in every little detail. This is William D. Barry, so I'm going to back up here. This is William D. Barry. I love Barry's mammals the most. Some of his birds can feel a little bit tighter. If you look at his mammals, they just have just incredible motion in them. But look at what he's doing here. All right, let's zoom down on that. Right, what's happening here? All of the covert feathers in here, you just have a little line at the edge of that. Here's 1, 2, 3 feathers. We see a little bit of those tertials. And then there's some feather edgeness going on here, but we don't have to put in all the details of everything that's going on in there. Same thing go over here. Here's an edge between greater and median coverts right in here, a little kind of hint that there's this edge, and the feathers are trending in this direction. What about these guys down here? Oh, what is this? This is the line between the back and the wing, sort of by the edge of the scapulars. What about this? Well, this is sort of suggesting that the covert feathers are ending somewhere in here. Here are my 1, 2, 3 of my secondaries kind of coming down in here with some primaries sticking out behind them. This one is simplified even more than that. So just suggesting some wing detail, but knowing where to put that is gold. This is So what's going on this wing? This line here, this is the edge of our coverts. And then this is the edge of our those the tertial feather coming down. This is the primary coverts sticking out here. But just with a few little lines, you have the impression of, he understands what is going on here, doesn't have to put it all in. What about here? Here is 1, 2, 3, and there's the whole pile the same length. That's the secondaries, and then there are primary feathers that are sticking out behind that. The covert feathers are ending. See this little line kind of tucking in here? This is all covert feathers up in here. So this is all covert feathers here. I'll drop down on this one level more. This is all covert feathers. This is the secondaries, primary coverts and primaries. This is secondary feathers. These are the edge of the coverts here. A smaller layer of coverts in there. Isn't that interesting? Just to sort of see like how these people are simplifying, not showing everything. And I might know that, yeah, there's this 1, 2, 3, and then all these little ones in here, and then this one starts here, and then this one is going to overlap from this. But we're not showing that. Look at this little yellow warbler. What's happening here? We have this little place where there's this line on the wing and here. So that's the edge of the greater and the median secondary coverts. He's actually drawn in one feather here. There's oh, there's 3 feathers. So he's drawn 3 feathers on this bird, and the rest is just a pattern, which our brains turn into feathers. So there's a couple of tertial feathers here that he's drawn in. There is this feather here, and then our brain interprets the rest of this as being more of these covert feathers coming down. The primary feathers are just this dark zone in here. So here's my 1, 2, 3 coming down. Primaries are out here. Here's the edge of the coverts. Very often, the lowest and sometimes the middle row of covert feathers will have wing bars on them. So when you see wing bar on a bird, whoop, that's the edge of the covert feathers. So there's edges of our covert feathers here. But so he's not drawing in every part of this bird. And lastly, I want to show you this junco. And just look at what is not put in. Right? But he understands the structure and is showing less than that. Another artist who I find, whoops, another artist who I find really inspiring is Tunnicliffe. And so this is a Brit. And so Tunnicliffe would do these very, very detailed studies. He would get a dead bird. He would put the dead bird um, onto his desk and draw it feather by feather by feather by feather. So he really, really knows the anatomy of things. But then is also willing to kind of back away from the edge and make a sketch with showing less than he knows. I'm going to grab another book off my shelf here just to show this person. Um, oh, here. Is this it? Nope. Ah, here I go. So, um, I'm just going to a little kind of Tunnicliffe sidebar here. Um, Here's another book by Tunnicliffe, or Tunnicliffe. Um, so he would find, whenever time he finds a dead bird, he does these feather by feather studies of everything that is going on them. Feather by feather, feather, and he measures these. He called these his measured drawings, and he would on bird after bird, feather by feather, draw out all the details of everything that he's seeing in them, right? So this person really knows anatomy to an incredible level of precision, right? That that is that's some oh my, right? That's some patience and just sort of love of structure. But then when you're seeing the bird out there in the field, that's different than the bird in the hand. The bird in the field, we're seeing these feathers as groups and masses. And we're showing less than we know. So here are the one, two, three, and the whole pile the same length is going to be in there. This wing over here, I can see a little bit of hint of a one, two, three coming down, and then there's some other wing-ish stuff happening there. Here is the three of the one, two, three, and here's the whole pile of the same length. So here's the last of the tertials, and then the primary feathers sticking out from underneath it. This zone in here, that's all those covert feathers that are overlapping. So he is drawing less than he knows. Let me. This is sort of so here's a a red wing that is got itself all fluffed out. So in wintertime, these birds will sit still, they'll hold still for you. So this bird was posing for him. So he's kind of going in a little bit more detail in here, right? But look at this one here. You're just kind of getting this shape, right? And he knows what is happening there, but he doesn't have to draw all that in. It's very easy to kind of get our brains into um, drawing more than we actually see. So here, as he's looking at this coot popping about, he's thinking about what are the major piles of feathers on the body of this bird. Um, and let me so if you understand what is there, you can suggest it. I'm going to pull another book off the shelf here. I'm wanting to find images of birds where um, we're putting in less than we know, right? So here on this turn, here's the edge of its back feathers, its scapular feathers. Here's the edge of its secondaries. These birds have short secondaries, long primaries. right? So a little bit of wing detail suggested out here, but a lot of this part in here, he's just giving us shapes of those parts of the bird. So these birds are nesting. So the bird is sitting very, very still for him. You can see kind of here in this sketch, he's mapping out where all these feathers go. And then over here, just suggesting it. Take a look at those two. Now I'm going to bring in one more example here, one moment. Oh, I thought it was. Right. Um, the last thing I want to do is to take a look at, oh, I love this. Love this owl. Ah, this sequence, this whole sequence, um, where you've got this, it starts up here with this owls flying around, kind of looking around like, ooh, what's that? Right, and then coming down on it, wow, ooh, hop, shoo, right, and then like, oh, look what I got, nom 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 nom, and then it flies away. Whoa, right? Look at how he is, on the specifically on the wing here, um, not drawing in all the details of everything that is there, but instead is looking at the sort of the major shapes here.
Which book is this one again?
This is Sketches of Bird Life.
Thank you.
Sketches of Bird Life. And yeah, this sequence of all the things on my bookshelves, um, this page is one of the most amazing nature journaling pages that I've ever glimpsed. This fascinates me. Um, to understand this structure so well. And this is, he's not using photographs and copying from photographs. This is from memory. This is from life in the field. That is incredible. Look at this cool peregrine falcon over here. Look at that. So suggestion of secondaries in here, and then the primaries are in there. Not having to put in every feather, 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 feather. Um, I'm going to give you one more drawing to kind of chew on. And this is a painting by Robert Bateman. And a lot of Robert Bateman paintings get super detailed. He often gets things really crisp by the eye. So the little rows of feathers that will be by the animal's eye, he'll really work those in. And then other parts he can suggest. And look at this wing. Look at that wing. I mean, that is master Robert Bateman there. Um, what do we have here? We have there's here's the edge of our coverts, and he's giving us a few little hints of some feather edges right in there. The secondaries are down in here as a block, as a shape. The primaries coming down this way, and there's our primary coverts as an area of tone, of dark. And so even Robert Bateman can give us birds where um, your imagination gets to fill in all the details. There are, here is here's a little downy woodpecker. And what's going on the wing? In this area of the wing, you can see some feather edges. The rest of it, he's just doing with um, deliberately placed white spots on those wings. So he knows the the structure of this bird very well, but he's not putting in all the detail that he knows. Um, he's not showing you that, this is how these coverts overlap over these ones. Same thing going on in this drawing here. Ah, come on, camera, come on back. Plug and plug in again. There, it's back. So you first look at this and you go like, oh my gosh, everything is here, super, super detailed. But no, I have a very finicky connection. Let's zoom down on this and see even Robert Bateman showing less than he knows. And let's just note what he is showing.
We were wondering, what kind of media is it that he uses?
This is acrylic. This is acrylic painting. So on here, most of this wing is handled um, just with the light and dark patterns. He's not showing feather edges. Right in here on 1, 2, 3, on these tertials coming down here, he is showing those feather edges. Right here, suggesting a couple of feather edges here these are the covert feathers in here. So there's covert feathers coming down here, smaller covert feathers here, right? Then the secondaries are here and the primaries are down here. So he's putting in a few little kind of dark edges in there. The rest he's leaving up to your imagination. So how do I then apply this to a bird sketch? Let's just I'll show you some, back up. So imagine, if you will, that you have, here's going to be a body of a bird somehow, and its wing is going to be drooping down this way. So maybe sort of robin style, how they'll droop their wing down. So the leading edge is here. Its secondaries and coverts are in here. So I'll often sort of start my wing by just sort of a big ball like that. And my covert edge is going to be somewhere in there. I could get in here and draw in all the details. And it's going to help me to be able to kind of map out all those parts in my head. But if I get in here and I draw all this in, it's going to start to feel like an anatomy diagram. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a few lines that are going to suggest all the detail that is here. So right up here on the top of the wing, the scapular feathers pile over, and they often have that can kind of leave a nice edge. And I'm instead of drawing in all the details of those, I'm just drawing a shadow that suggests that there are feathers above it. So instead of thinking to myself, I have this feather here, and then this feather here, and this feather here that are overlapping like that, what I'm doing is I'm imagining how the shadow of that shape is going to appear. So I can just give myself kind of a little, something like that. And sometimes where these feathers kind of come together, maybe right in here, there might be a darker shadow. Sometimes they'll have a little kind of dot like that. So that suggests that this overlapping layer is feather, feather, feather without having to draw in feather, feather, feather. Right? Now, I've got these greater coverts in here. I've got my um, tertials and my primaries. Let's kind of handle all those things. So for these, maybe I'm going to go Robert Bateman style, give myself, or was that we saw this in Bill Berry, kind of gave us, here's one feather, and guess what? These are all other feathers, and they're overlapping that way. So that's this feather and this feather and this feather and this feather. And they're going to go all the way up to here. There's other feathers. They're stopping somewhere in there because they hit the other covert feathers. And then in here, I've got my tertials and my secondaries. So maybe here is the kind of the outside edge of that group. And I've got maybe there's one, two, and then three feathers that are progressively longer. There's a whole pile the same length, and I'm not going to even have to draw all that. Maybe that's all I've got. And now I'm just going to maybe make where these primary coverts are a little bit darker. And I have a suggestion of all of this detail, but I'm not getting in there and drawing the whole thing. Let's do somebody with maybe more pattern on their wing, right? So here, maybe we're on the back of of a some sort of a warbler. And its wing is going to be tucked up a little bit more. So I'm drawing a little oval for the top part of the wing, the covert feathers and the scapulars and the secondaries. And that's going to come down to here, and there's a little bit of primary feathers sticking out. So that's a space I'm going to fit my wing into. And the covert feathers are going to swoosh across the top part of that. Let's give myself the top edge of the scapulars. Maybe they're somewhere in here. And this has bright white wing bars. So the edges of these covert feathers, these first couple of rows of covert feathers, are going to have, what I used to do is I draw in all of these feather edges. Now, let me show you how that looks. If I do that, so I'm going to grab my old field guide here. It was kind of fun. Before the book came out, they sent me this thing that wasn't bound, and it was just all these kind of loose pages. But I kept this. It's sort of a neat artifact of the process of kind of how they went about making this book. But something that's nice about that, I can take some of these pages and uh, flatten them out Let's see. Yeah, I'm kind of getting in here and I'm drawing in all the edges. Oh, this shows it rather nicely, right? So you see what I did is I drew in every feather and then colored in. But that's not how the bird looks because that turns this white wing bar into this grid. It doesn't look like that. Um, but that's how I understood the feathers. Let's look at this one here. You can see all these prominent black lines, the edges of my pencil, where I drew in all those covert feathers, and then colored it in. But again, that's not what we see. Drawing in all the edges and then coloring it in. Um, so what am I going to do on this little rascal? Um, so this is going to be maybe a Townsend's warbler. Um, so they have a big pile of secondary feathers, and on those feathers there are little white edges. The primary feathers stick out a little bit more. I'm going to give myself a primary is going to make those nice and dark coming down here. And then in here on these feather edges, if I'm just doing this with my pencil, whoops, if I'm just doing this with my pencil, um, I can kind of draw in feather and then skip down. And what I'm doing here is I'm drawing along the edge of that feather. And then I will show the edge of this next feather here. And then I have these little pale feather edges.
Oh, could you maybe back up one? Oh, there,
Oh
perfect.
yeah, back up. That's a good idea. Back up, right? Then I can get lost in sort of what I want to do is just sort of show a little bit of the back feathers to see how we kind of integrate this little birdie with it with this back. Or maybe I could even John Busby style leave some highlight places in the back here where the sunlight is hitting it. He does wonderful things where you just kind of get the feeling of sunlight hitting the backs of birds. Oh, there's a sneeze gonna happen. Sorry about that.
Salud.
Thank you. Um, but so here is it's a wing with some detail in it. But again, what I would have had done before is it would have looked like this, where I would have said these are the edges of all of my feathers. These ones are overlapping this way. These ones aren't. And then you see there's this grid over the whole thing. And instead, what I want to do is I want to back off that and just sort of suggest those patterns. I'm going to do one more here. And I'm going to do this one in color. some watercolor and colored pencil. Let's say I've got let's say there's a little bird, maybe a bush tit. Let's make this a bush tit. They're so cute and fluffy. And its wing is going to be kind of up in this area here. And let's see what I did on my previous bush tit from the field guide. My guess is that it is going to be overworked. Too many notes. Got my pages out of order. Yeah. So on my bush tit, I've got a lot of lines in there sort of showing, these are the edges of all these different feathers. What might I be more likely to see? So this is a tiny little bird, so it gets a big head. They're really cute. The males have old dark eyes, and the females have a yellow iris. Otherwise, the sexes just look identical. And I'm going to make this a watercolor and pencil drawing. These often show up in big flocks, where there'll just be you hear chip, chip, chip all over the oak tree, and then you look up and there's this whole swarm of these wonderful little birds that will come in. Maybe there'll be 20 in the same tree. Um, and then they're gone. They've moved on. They've all foraged together. And they're on to the next tree. And we're going to have a little bit more. Oh, what are the colors on the bush tit? I think the forehead is a little bit more brownish on it. So don't trust these colors on a real bush tit. This is just from memory, not looking at any reference material. And then we're going to get into more of a grayish back. And I'm going to put a solid color over the entire wing. Oh, forgot all the bush tit colors. With this field guide in front of me, I think it'd be easy enough just to go take a look. Okay. Off on the side, sneaking a peek at reference material. Oh yeah, gray on the back. I probably made this guy's belly a little bit too dark right in here. And we'll make that back a little bit darker. Little bird wants a longer tail too. But right now I just have this longer tail goes off the page. I have a just a dark shape on that wing. I'm going to put a little shadow by its belly. I'm going to let this dry. Actually, first I'm going to make, if I wanted to add to just sort of make this wing a little bit more interesting, maybe put very often in the primaries, it's a little bit darker. Don't really remember on the bush tit, but I'm suspecting it is. So I'm going to make my little primary areas here a little bit darker, kind of give them a little bit more. So much water down there on the page, it's not. There we go. And now I'm going to let that dry. And to speed my drawing, I'm going to use a hair dryer here. All right. Now I'm going to just I'm going to put in a few little kind of highlights with a white pencil. And what I want to do is, as I do this, I'm thinking about those feathers, and I'm going to just try to suggest a little bit of those feathers. So in this area here, that's where my coverts are, and they're going to be making a pile in this area that will be catching light in this area. And I am just going to give a few little marks in there along the edge of the coverts. And then the secondaries are going to be in this area, and they might make a little bump in here. And maybe there's a little bit of fluff on the back, a little bit of. So I can come by, put a few little highlights on, and then think of where would the shadows be. And maybe there's a little bit of a shadow edge by on the bottom side of the coverts here. Maybe where the primaries are, going to give that a little bit more dark. And I'm going to put a couple of little lines in here on part of where those tertials are, and give a little hint that there's some other kind of weird feather thing going on in there. And then I don't like this blotch right here. So a hint of some wing stuff, but then stop. And that is, I think, often a kind of, I'm not showing everything that I know, but I think I get something that feels a little bit more like the bird. I think I'm also going to make the chest lighter by adding a little bit of floofiness in with my colored pencil there into the chest. And finally, I'm going to try to, with a tip of my hat to Robert Bateman, hit a little bit of detail around its eye. So this edge. Sometimes we have that little kind of feather rings around the eye. And then I'm going to make its eye wet. There's my little dark pupil. There's my highlight on it. And there's my little fluffy friend. But its wing is handled more minimally. So the marks that I have on that wing are mostly there's something kind of by the edge of the coverts and sort of starting down the tertials. There's sort of a little kind of there are some shadow marks in there. There's a little bit of a shadow mark up in here, maybe one of the other little coverts in there. And then on the edge of the primaries there, between the secondaries and the primaries, there's some dark. But those are the details that are going in there on that wing. Hi. I hope that this was useful. And so that if to kind of to summarize, my big thought is to look at the shapes of some wings, um, study some of the uh, study some of these sort of these groups of feathers. Get yourself to the point where you understand, oh, those are the greater coverts. These are the secondary feathers here. There's the primary feathers in here. And suggest a little bit of that information, but hold back from, as I did here, like drawing in all of those details. We're now having to go back and I'm working on a second edition of the whole Sierra book, but it's going to start with a second edition of the birds part. And so I'm redrawing every bird and um, finding that I get things that look a little bit closer to the bird when um, I don't put in all the structure that is there. But in order to get the patterns to be in the right place, I want to really understand that structure. So I hope that that is useful, and I hope that this has been fun. Um, so I'd love to hear from you. Any thoughts, comments, and ideas on what we've been doing today, or if you want to share any of your work, see what's been going on in your journals, and so let's see.
We
Let's join Lewis.
okay.
All right, hold on a second. Um, and oh, hi there. It's good to see you.
There. Good to see you. So I posted this in the chat a little while ago. And the question is, are the primary feathers always longer than the secondary feathers, or could be the same length or shorter? Tell us about
Yeah.
that.
So in most birds, the general rule is that the primaries will be longer than the secondaries. And let me give you a few examples of this, and then we'll look at what the exceptions are. Because some of these really these two extremes, both when the primaries are crazy long, um, and when the primaries are really short, can be very, very confusing to people. So a great example of this, I'm going to share the screen again and go to here. Hold on a second. Um, so we want to go to birds, and then we're going to take a look at, oh, come on, don't load slowly. We want to take a look at something like swallows. Swallows have primary feathers for days and days and days. And oh yeah, hummingbirds do it too. So we'll go here to the hummingbirds. Hummingbirds have the best names. what is that? The gorgeted wood star. Here is the lesser violet ear. Violet ear, oh violet ear, I do not think you are any lesser. But look at this wonderful little bird. So on this, um, this is what happens when you just go primary crazy, right? The the secondary feathers on this bird are, here's one, two, three, whole pile the same length. That is the secondary feathers, right? Um, these ones up in here, these are your greater covert feathers. As we get down here on this wing, this is your primary coverts. And yep, that whole other thing, those are all primaries sticking out down there. So this is a great example of what if you had a primary party and never stopped. This is the that is impressive.
Are those primaries different lengths?
Yes, exactly right. So the first primary feather is this long. The last primary feather
Wow.
is that long, right? And then all those other ones, doobly doobly doop, between them, those are all the other primary feathers wanting to come to the primary party. Um, but wait, because what if you had a uh, if you kind of were kind of going less on this, let's take a look at larks. A B C D F G H I J K L larks. Larks. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have a tertial party on this bird. We're going to get a little bit of primary going on. But what we're going to do on those, remember the 1, 2, 3, and then the whole pile the same length? On that 1, 2, 3, we're going to just be a little bit extra enthusiastic. So, annotate this. Here, this is 1, 2, 3, and then you've got this whole pile of the same length coming up in here. So most of this space is then taken up by your tertials here. And
Could you expand it a little so we can see better?
sorry, do what?
Change the view. You
Do,
run on the edge.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Say it one more time.
You're running off the edge. We can't see very well.
Oh, okay. Let me. Um, now. There we go.
Yeah, much better.
Is that better?
Much better. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So again, in here, in this little horned lark, tertials are all in here. Covert feathers are going to be in there. Sorry for using the same color. And this this tiny little bit sticking out here, that's all you get of primaries. Um, the and in some larks, this is going to be more extreme. So let's take a look at other larks here. Let's see if there's a lark here that, what are you doing? Yeah, look at this one. The greater short-toed lark. Greater, the greater short-toed lark. um, and look at that. You look on the back and you see 1, 2, 3,
Oh,
right? Where's
no
where's the
primary.
primaries? The tertials here are hiding them,
Wow.
right? On this far wing, the wing under, let's see if we can kind of zoom in down there, right? You can see just a little, see a little dark crescent under the last tertial there? That is a little bit of primary feather sticking out. And so that's a confusing little bit of bird business. Let's look at the this Indian bush lark. On this bird, if
Can you
I
move it over?
sure, is
Yeah.
that better?
Yes.
Okay, and then we can even zoom in here more. Is that still reasonably in your screen?
Yes.
Okay. Um, but check this out. Um, the first tertial feather is here. That's 1. Number 2 is here. Number 3 is here. And then here you see some edges of primary feathers tucking underneath there. But they are, so here's some primaries kind of tucked up underneath that. And a little bit of out there. But here, your tertials are covering up all of that wing business. That's crazy. I'm looking at this bird, its right tarsus has a strange bend in it. Wonder what this bird's childhood was like.
The colored edges of each feather are pretty impressive.
Yeah, they are. They are. That really makes a neat pattern, doesn't it? So if I were drawing something like this, I'll show you kind of a fast way of drawing this. I think the easiest thing to do would be to stop share and go to, let's say you were drawing something and there's these, each feather edge has a really bold pattern on it. And that's going to be most in your face when the bird has a fresh set of feathers. So when the bird has freshly molted, those white edges show up better. And then as it kind of goes about its bird day, it's rubbing those feathers off on all sorts of things. And so those white edges just get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter as the bird gets older until the next time it sheds out. And so a lot of these birds that will start off with these crisp, clean white edges on the feathers, the dark, like if you look at most birds, the primaries are really dark compared to other feathers on the birds. And the reason is that the melanin in the feather, the darkening pigment, is a feather strengthener.
Oh.
And so, especially out on your flying wingtips where they're going to be rubbing up against anything, you want a lot of melanin out there. But if you have a white tip on that, that white tip that doesn't have melanin is going to braid off really, really fast. If you look at, say, starlings in winter, they've got all these little white spots on their chest. And then in summertime, they don't. It's because all those white spots rubbed off, leaving just the dark feathers that are underneath them. So, so sometimes so a bird in really fresh plumage will often have some of these little white pinstriping, and I'll show you kind of a strategy for drawing that. What I do is, let's go over here. I'm going to turn to this view again, right? So let's say this is the back of a bird here. And I'm going to give this one long tertials and kind of coming up here into some coverts. So this will be a bird where we're going to have those 1, 2, 3, those tertials will be really, really, really prominent. What I will do is I will paint it. And when I go to paint it, I sometimes use a slightly darker version of what I want. I want this to be dark enough for my for light colors to show up on it. Well, let's say this is, so imagine that that's the back of my bird. And then what I do is I let that dry completely. I can still see a little bit of light sort of moisture on it, so I know it's not dry yet. You want it to be bone dry for this to work. Still not dry enough. Still not dry enough. We'll touch it, right? Still wet.
Does it make any difference if you use that hair dryer or you let it dry overnight?
Oh, no. So if I'm working out in the field, natural sunlight does this really fast. Here in my studio, I'll hit it with the hair dryer, or you can just use time. If you're in a really humid environment, though, it can take forever for things to dry. And actually, while we're at it, let's just take this little bird here, and I'm going to do the same thing up here with this one. And where did I put my brush? There I put my brush. Let's just, for fun, I'm going to make this. Oh no, all of my wing turned dark. I'm going to make that nice and dark. And dry that too. So now I have to think of how how white and stark do I want to make these lines on this thing? because there's several ways that I can go about it. For more subtle lines, the white Prismacolor pencil is great. And here I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger. And I'll bring you back on in just a moment. Right. So, um, so if I see how nicely that shows up. And here's the next feather. So that's one way of doing it. I can draw these little white lines on with my white Prismacolor pencil. This lets, and if I sharpen the tip of it, I can get more, texture into that line. Sometimes I want things to be bolder than that. So another strategy that I can use is, let's see if I ask these lines to step away. I can use gouache paint. And gouache paint, well, I'm going to grab something out of my drawer here. Gouache paint is much like watercolor, but opaque. And I have a tube here of white gouache. And if I really want, if I don't mind it being kind of transparent, I can use, say, a glob of dried gouache like this, and I will clean my brush, wiping it here on this rag, giving it a little squeeze. I then take the tip of it and I swirl it in this. Try not to have too much water there, because what I'm trying to do is to make this into kind of a thick clayey paste. And then I spin the tip. And I can test on here. And I then can paint in these feather edges with the white gouache. Sometimes if you have trouble getting it to, but you'll notice as this dries, what's going to happen, which is one of the really irritating things about gouache, is that I will put down, see, I'll put down this little kind of line here, and it will feel nice and bright. As this dries, we're probably going to see it get more brown. You'll see the color come through it. It becomes less opaque as it dries. And that can be very, very frustrating. I'm already feeling frustrated. You see that kind of getting darker in there where it's drying? You can see where it's wet here, it's still white. Over there where it is, you can see that dark coming through. And so the thicker the gouache, the less of that I see. So sometimes what I'll do is I can take some gouache paint straight out of the tube, make sure I don't have a lot of water on my brush so that it's nice and dry, pick up some fresh gouache right out of there. I'm going to sharpen my point by spinning it slightly on my paper. And now this one, this is I have this will be more opaque. Can add some texture into it. And I can get the white lines on this thing that way. I'm now going to go back to this little wing here, and I'm going to add a few. Oh, there's one other way that I have can add um, white lines on top of the paper like this. And that is using a gel pen. And so here is a gel pen. This is a jelly roll. And um, when I draw with this on here, you see I get little white lines on a dark surface as well. And something that's neat about the gel pen is that it is water soluble. So um, if I make a mark, some marks on here, and then I decide I don't want that, even if it dries. Well, actually, here's one thing that I'll do. If I make a mark and it feels too bold and I want it to be lighter, while it's still wet, I can tap it with my finger. And I now have some of that ink on my finger, and it's made that line lighter. But let's say this one dries, and say it's not coming up on my finger. Okay, I can get a clean brush and I can lift it out. Or I can make it a little bit more faint. And if I want to get completely rid of it, I can say, please go away. Now let's go back here to this wing and just use these three techniques to play with it a little bit more.
It looks like your black wing has white showing through it. What's that about?
This one here.
Yeah.
Yep. So that you can that's just because I didn't put the watercolor on it very thickly.
Ah,
So you're seeing some of the paper um, and some of the pencil lines still showing through that. So it's a little bit of transparent watercolor that's on there. But if I wanted to here, um, I could say, all right, this bird has on these covert feathers, there's these ones get a little wing bar, and we have a wing bar here. And I'm going to use the gouache straight out of the tube because I want those to be nice and bold. Then I'm sharpening a pencil, a white pencil. I might give some of these little, you can't really see that very well on the screen. I'm going to give some of these feather edges here just a little hint that they're feathers. On these tertials, same thing. And then down on the bottoms of them, I'm going to come in with some gel pen. And let's say on this bird, there are more secondary edges that are bright in here. And I want those to show up. I can just draw those in with this. And then make them a little bit less bright by tapping them with my finger. And then maybe I want some of this tertial edge to be stronger. And then I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but that is just a little bit too in your face, right? And also in this area, I've got my primary coverts, so I will paint those out. This is just a clean brush with water in it. And maybe I want to make that just a little bit lighter. So I'm going to take up a little bit of that brush. And maybe some of these edges here. And those primaries. Lastly, I'm going to come around with my pencil and just crisp up some of those edges right there. And I was able to get some more sort of light patterns into that wing fairly easily. But I'm doing opaque work on top of that wing with pencils and pens and gouache. Was that useful?
Thank you for a very detailed answer to a very short question.
Well, I think your question is something that it kind of it sparked it sparked another whole investigation. So thank you for that, Lois.
Okay.
Let's join Susan Beckart. And you can unmute, and I'm going to bring you into. Hello there.
Hello. Hi. This was very excellent. I only just wanted to show something just briefly in connection with some of the discussion of the last questions, particularly with the sort of the spark of question about the birds having similar length primaries versus secondaries. So the artist, I forget which one it was you mentioned, who would take, when he found dead birds and would like diagram them out so well. So yes, Tunnicliffe, here, yes. So I was, this reminded me, so I shared this almost 2 years ago. It's been a while, but this was just after I'd first kind of had some classes of yours where you were talking about the different parts of the wing and different feather groups and things. As I said, and I found the opportunity of a lifetime here because I found, unfortunately, very sadly, a road-killed turkey.
Ooh, okay, I got to make my screen smaller here. Hold on a moment. One moment.
So it was just lying there. So I think people gave me a lot of very strange looks as they were driving by, but I was in a safe spot, and we're on the sidewalk, and so I just started sketching it. But the thing about turkeys is, as it turns out, is that every part of their every feather group has a different set of patterns. So it's really good for education of this. So I could identify. I could identify the primaries, secondaries, secondary coverts. I'm realizing now I actually drew. There's a little border here.
Yes,
and I actually
yes, your alula.
I labeled this as primary coverts, but this is the alula, isn't it? Because these are the primary coverts.
That's right. That's right.
So
check you out.
But yeah, and I also, so then another thing I remembered from those things I remember thinking of this is that you're noticing that within the feather groups on the body, that the feathers start off small at the top and then they get bigger. And
Yeah.
so there's this little group here where they're very small and they get bigger, which I think is I'm not that's might be the some coverts. I'm not 100% sure, but then you
Yeah.
have another little group here. But yeah, so I recommend turkeys if anyone has the opportunity, because every feather group is differently marked for your convenience. So, but I also noticed that in this case the primaries were a little bit longer than the secondaries, but
Mm-hmm.
not very much. And the other thing that I had noticed and noted at the time was that the tips of the primaries were very squared off. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting shape. And then I looked closer and realized that they were actually broken off.
Mm.
And so I had some little speculation about wondering, why is that turkey dragging its wingtips on the ground or something? I mean, I don't know. But so
Oh,
then
that's
I did
cool.
actually then during that same time, I did measure in decimeters, by the way.
Nice.
Like by
Yeah,
the
we just
way,
want to send a shout out to decimeters. We love you.
they don't get much love, but sometimes it's the right measurement to use. I did not, for some reason, measure this part. So as far as actual, and I also couldn't really see underneath the wing to measure the actual length of the primaries. So I don't know quite where the primaries connect underneath all that, but but that was just an interesting thing here. And then some little pictures of the wings here, of the different feathers that
These
I've been able to see.
individual feather studies. Oh,
So
you
yeah, this
went
was
to
quite
town.
an exciting opportunity, and I made the most of it. Um, but yeah, so I do recommend, if you do have the opportunity, you will get strange looks if you are sketching roadkill on the side of the road. Also, do not sketch roadkill while sitting in the road. But if you are in a safe place and you can do it, people
Yes.
will look at you strangely and ask if everything's okay, and you can just
Yeah.
tell them that you are sketching things, and they'll still think you're strange. But
Yes. Yes. No, people don't really understand our fascination with roadkill.
I mean, they should. I think that it's a very reasonable thing to do. But
Yeah, it is. It's a
maybe
good
that's why I
thing.
like turkey vultures so much.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it is. And so we also want to sort of be aware that sort of scavenging things from dead beasties that we find, um, depending on what you are looking at, sometimes there are local state and national laws that relate to these sorts of things. So, for instance, I can't take a migratory bird and bring it home with me if I find it dead outside. Amelia found a dead golden-crowned sparrow on the way to school, and she called me up like, "Dad, there's a dead bird here on the way to school. You got to come get it." And it was a
And your
golden-crowned
sketchbook
sparrow.
can go sketch it right there. Yeah. And I think that applies even though it's the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. It applies to non-migratory birds as well, right? It's like all wild birds with the exception of game birds, I believe.
Um, so the uh there are some birds that it doesn't apply to. We should actually get as a guest somebody from National Wildlife Service
That would be cool.
come talk about it. Well, I'll set that up. That would be kind of a fun conversation.
I remember looking into that when I had seen this turkey, because I thought, well, it'd be neat to bring some of the feathers home, although
I think the turkey you can bring home. I think it is not covered by.
yeah. So I actually did look it up, because so turkeys are game birds that can be hunted, but you are allowed to take parts of a turkey home even if you don't have a hunt, even if you haven't hunted them. But I also decided, first of all, it was kind of hard I couldn't really pull any feathers out. Uh,
And
so
then people
I
about
decided to bring it
driving by,
here.
they're
Also, it
gonna
was dead, and I didn't know how long it had been dead. So I ultimately
roll
decided
out the
maybe I
window.
just won't. So that's when I sketched them right there. But so yeah, I looked into it. But yeah, I think I do believe. I mean, I just, as a general rule, I would not take home any bird, whether or not it was migratory. Just for the sake of it. And then that also applies to feathers and other parts of birds too. Technically, everyone probably collects feathers. Technically, I think you're not allowed to even own feathers of birds apart from ones that are okay, without the right permits and things.
That's right.
No one's going to break into your home and arrest you for it. But yeah, so that's why I sort of thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just try and sketch feathers in my sketchbook, which I try to do if I find one, and that helps.
Yeah. And yeah, somebody pointed out that we also want to be aware of birds as potential vectors for disease. There are some diseases that do jump between humans and birds. And so especially when I find a bird out in the if something is like lying next to the window and I see this little splat pattern on the window, I kind of like, I think I know how you came down. Um, and so I'm not as concerned about disease with that. But the dead bird out there in the field, avian flu.
Right.
Um, there are diseases that are spread by birds because we are so physiologically different um, than birds. There's not as much that will come through like if you find a rat and you start playing with a dead rat. There's much more disease that can kind of come over to you.
On the
Um,
other hand, you have the situation or a disease that, because it has co-evolved with its usual host, it's generally not going to be deadly to that host, but it might be deadly to you because it's not particularly advantageous for the disease to not be deadly to you, and so it might do things.
yeah. The so yeah, we do want to try to be safe. Like, and there's some interesting things like armadillos. Armadillos have this really low body temperature. And so they are a really effective host for Hansen's disease, which used to be called leprosy. And you think of like when leprosy establishes itself in a human, it's in fingertips, in noses, it's in tips of ears, it's parts of the body that are further out with lower temperatures. But because this little armadillo running around with this low body temperature, I'm really kind of into this because my wife is Sabella's a infectious disease specialist, and she actually wrote the chapter on Hansen's disease for the big kind of national um, like the big manual of infectious disease. She wrote the Hansen's disease chapter on it. And but that's where I learned that like armadillos have this thing going on where they can be carrying around Hansen's disease.
So if you see an armadillo, admire it from a distance, don't hug it.
No snug, yeah, this makes snuggling armadillos more nuanced,
Well, there
doesn't
goes
it?
my life's ambition then, because
I
armadillos are
know,
very
I
cute.
know, I know. Um, the while I realized that there's one other um uh there's a I've got another book here that might be of interest to people and sort of looking at sketches, kind of quick sketches. This is one I was looking for over in my shelf and I couldn't find it just because I brought it over here to this table, but I want to show it to you now. And it's this one, Birds by Character, with an unfortunate subname. All right. All right. So this Birds by Character book, this was this field guide to British birds that they got a bunch of people who do quick field sketches, including John Busby, to do the illustrations for it. And so I just want to show you this in terms of like kind of simplifying kind of bird feather groups. Can I show you this? All right, so check this out. Check this out. This is cool. I'm going to go to this screen. Boom. All right. And we'll zoom down. Hi. Um, look at this cool thing. Right? So it's all these field sketches of birds. And you know how normally everybody's like drawing the loon as feather, 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 feather. But these, you can see them, these wonderful sketches that are just major feather groups. And look at how they're handling. Let's go over to look at what's going on with these duck sketches. Oh, pen drop, right? These are scapular feathers out here. Let's go take a look at there's a bunch of different artists. There is one who kind of puts in a lot more details. This feels much more like a field guide illustration, less like a field sketch. So I'm gonna go past that person's. Oh, here's more John Busby. Bow, chicka, bow. Oh, we love you, John Busby. Yes, we do. But then let's go to where are the Corvids? Oh, here we go. Look at these. There is oh, bounce, bounce, bounce. This is this is my favorite picture in the book. Oh. But look at this simplification of birdwing. And look at that. So a few well-placed shadows. Like, this is what happens when people who really watch birds do the illustrations. This is the raven kind of playing around in the air. But look at this, look at this. All right. There you can see the 1, 2, 3. There's your tertials back there. All your covert business is going on in there. Little hint of this. Look at this guy. Oh, see, this is just masterful representing what's going on these wings. Now let me see if there's any ones like this. Like here they're basically doing a diagram. Like here's all the birds. This is a different illustrator, really good, but kind of has less of a feel. Like then and here's John Busby again. Look at that. So you can see like John Busby is saying like, hey, these are covert feathers. Your tertials are coming down dark, and then as you get into the secondaries, there's a sort of little white patch in there. Edge of these tertials may have little white edges on them. Yeah. Look at this one for sort of simplification of wing. So these are done with an, oh, look at the robin.
Oh, Jack, just giving you time check. You asked me to let you know when it was 12:30.
Ah, thank you very much. Oh, if I was wondering about how they do ruby crown kinglet, they don't have ruby crown kinglet in here because it's all British birds. But let's see if they have any similar little insectivores. There's a gold crest, which is very similar to, but this is also done with more of an illustrator style as opposed to the field sketch style. Well, boop that snoot. All right. Now I am going to go back to boop. I push this button and I'm big again. Hi. Let's join Ray Bonto. And then we're going to be wrapping up for the day. It's good to see you. You can unmute and we're going to bring you into the spotlight. Hello there. Oh, I'm going to take my screen down. I'm going to remove my spotlight. Oh, let's see. That screen was not wanting to. Okay, here we go. Come on. Oh no, it's washing out. Oh, yeah, there we go. Hold it back there. Yep. Whoa, tell us about constructing this page. Is this from the bird drawing class?
Just today.
This is today's.
Yeah.
Ah, see everybody, I told you Ray Bonto was filling up just pages. This think of like, you know, how can you kind of find opportunities for putting in your pencil miles? Just so much graphite put to great use in the course of this class here. That's really cool to see.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ivea just said you're going to be our next John Busby, man. This is. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just reduced the brightness.
Oh, very good, very good. So yeah, I see that you understand the structure, and you are able to simplify um, and still maintain your understanding of that structure. Sarah has just commented that we're just seeing so much progression over the past 2 years. It's really fun to see this. I absolutely agree with Sarah. The pencil miles that you put in, you know, it's not like we get to some point and we have arrived and we stop developing. You're continuing to challenge yourself and push yourself. I'm also seeing that your line variation in those is really nuanced, like these lines that are really dynamic. Really strong observation, and I really want to let you know how much I respect the um, the the pencil miles you're putting in.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
You too.
Let's see. With that, Ivea, is it all right if I bring you back on for a little wrap up here? Ray Bontos, thank you so much for sharing your pages there with us. We hope that this workshop has been helpful to everybody. You know, something that is nice about kind of this approach to drawing the wings is that it's faster and it can be a lot of fun. You know, how can I, instead of representing everything about that wing, kind of how can I represent, you know, what I see kind of when I'm looking at that wing from way back here. So folks, you can do this. Putting in practice, filling pages like Ray Bonto with all our marks is the best way to do it. So it's marks on paper. And if you're worried about wasting paper, like then reduce the amount of junk mail that comes into your house. And you'll make a much bigger impact than you will by not using up sketchbook paper. Susan Beckhart says, yeah, it's okay. Paper grows on trees. Do you have any last thoughts for us today, Ivea, as we are kind of bringing our program to a close?
Just that we hope that this was fun. And if also, if I saw people had questions about anatomy, write those down in your nature journals. Anytime that we learn something here and we get a question like that, write it down, because the answer, we'll probably come across it in the future. So keep track of all of those questions. And then it can be fun to go back through your journal later and see how many of them you answered. Also, it's going to be really, really fun putting what you showed us today to practice out in the field. I'm really excited. Thank you.
So folks, get your bird on. We can do this. Have fun with it. And the more that Ray Bonto says, right, just dive into it. It's okay. It's okay. The more you allow yourself just to play on paper, the more the paper is going to become your friend. And what if we're scared of putting stuff on paper, then and we don't have a lot of stuff on paper, then each thing we put on paper feels like a big deal. So if I do a demo and the demo doesn't work out the way that I hoped, that's okay. We've seen others, right? And that other one worked out okay. So there's just less pressure on this one. Like if everybody's going to know you by this one online demo that you did, right? Then there's so much pressure on that one moment. Similarly, if you just do a few pages in a sketchbook, then there's this little kind of there's pressure on each one of those pages. Part of your ego is saying like this has got to be good. But if you've got 100 pages, 500 pages, 10,000 pages, then each one is just like, oh, it's just another page and it's okay. And there'll be one after that and there'll be one after that. The more you do, the more the volume of work itself buffers you from that inner critic who says, who do you think you are? You can't do this. You see that one sketch that you made over there in the corner? That one didn't come out the way you planned, did it? Right? Right? Because it is one of only three, it has much more resonance. But when it's one of 10,000, right? Then it's like, hey, it's a process and I'm in the process. So again, the more you do, this is kind of one of these it's a tough thing because if you don't have a lot of stuff, then each one is harder because A, you don't have practice, and there's more psychological pressure on each one. But know that it gets better because the more that you have, then there's less pressure on each thing. And also to get there was that much more practice. So these two things work together. The more you do, the more you will do. And the more you do, the more you can do. You can absolutely do this. And we hereby officially grant you artistic license. So you now have your artist license. Go ahead, use paper. It's okay. It's going to be fun. And Avea? We get 2 thumbs up. Avea, thank you so much for your help and support of this community and this group. We really appreciate that. And the way you also help us in the chat. And folks, if you want to get to know Avea even more deeply, we invite you to Pencil Miles and Chill. Really great community. Until we meet again, everybody, happy bird wing simplifying. And we'll see you again soon.
Happy
Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Jack.